Undercover boss orders a meal at his cafe, shocked when waitress refuses to take his order. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, back to our main character. The ones who do the work don't get the tips. The one who gets them is the manager's nephew. She said it like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. No hesitation, no outrage, just fact. And that's what made it sting. It wasn't just theft. It was normalized theft. A wrong so common that no one even raised an eyebrow anymore. The chipped ceramic cup in her hand trembled only slightly as she set it on the counter. Outside, the drizzle had softened, smudging the windshield of parked cars, turning the morning into a gray blur. The neon sign above the cafe door flickered. Open 24 hours. Its hum steady but tired, as if it too had been ignored for years. At that corner booth, a man sat quietly, dressed like any other traveler passing through. Worn jeans, faded jacket, a ball cap tugged low. He stirred his coffee once, let the spoon fall with a muted clink, and listened. That man was Jackson Reeves, 52, CEO and founder of Sunrise Restaurant Group, though no one here knew it. To them, he was just another stranger lingering over a bitter cup of coffee. But what he heard cut sharper than the caffeine ever could. A waitress, her name tag read Cassie, stood only a few feet away, her hair tied back in a loose band, apron neatly tied but frayed at the edges. She spoke to a coworker under her breath, her tone resigned, almost casual. Morning shifts are the worst. We split tips, but only a few actually get anything. She didn't even bother lowering her voice further. To her, this was routine, expected, the way things were. Jackson's gaze narrowed. He'd reviewed the HR dashboards just last week. This branch reported strong numbers, revenue up 3 quarters in a row, customer satisfaction stable, even slightly above average. On paper, it was thriving. Yet the turnover here was the worst in the region. Engagement scores flatlined. He had brushed it off as a blip, a statistical outlier. Now, sitting with a chipped cup cooling in his hands, he realized it was something deeper, something rotten, hidden beneath the glossy reports. Cassie moved with quiet precision. She poured coffee for table 6, refilled mugs without spilling a drop, folded napkins one-handed as she balanced trays with the other. She wasn't flashy, but her movements carried intention, purpose, the kind of presence that kept a place alive while no one noticed. And yet she spoke as if invisible. If your role isn't assigned at the register, you don't see the tips. Tyler does. He always does. Jackson let her words hang in the air. The name Tyler echoed. A nephew, family ties, favoritism that turned fairness into a rigged game. His jaw tightened, but he didn't move. Not yet. He thought back to something he once told a group of new regional managers years ago. If you want to know whether a restaurant is healthy, don't ask the general manager. Watch how the staff pour coffee at 7 a.m. And now, here it was. Proof, not in spreadsheets, but in the wearied tone of a waitress and the tremble of her chipped cup. He picked up his notebook, old leather cover scratched from years of travel, flipped it open, and jotted a single line. Tips diverted. Manager's nephew. System compromised. Then he set the pen down, lifted his cup again, and drank the last of the cold coffee, letting the bitterness settle. The silent investigation had just begun. Jackson stayed in that booth longer than he needed to, just another nameless man nursing a cold cup of coffee. Through the rain-streaked window, the cafe looked ordinary, the kind of place no one would expect secrets to hide. But inside, the signs were everywhere if you knew how to look. Tyler, the nephew, hovered by the POS terminal, his hair slicked back, shirt pressed, not a stain on him. He didn't carry trays, didn't refill mugs, didn't step toward a single table unless it was to swipe a card. Every digital tip that came through funneled through his hands. Jackson watched him tap the screen, arms crossed between transactions like a gatekeeper. Cassie, meanwhile, circled the floor with practiced ease. Table 9 asked for toast. Table 6 wanted a refill. A trainee hesitated near the counter, not knowing how to flag an allergy order. Cassie slid in without hesitation, crouched beside her, voice calm and patient. She showed the rookie how to adjust codes, how to check modifiers, how not to lean on Tyler for help. Her words were steady. He's not wrong. He just won't do it for you. Jackson heard it, and the weight of it sank deeper than the drizzle outside. He took a long breath, pulled his notebook closer, and wrote again. Division of labor visible. Division of reward invisible. Cassie returned moments later with a tray. She leaned slightly, gathering plates. Her voice dropped. I don't even have access to the register. My role's listed as supplemental staff. It's the invisible list. No access means no tips. She hesitated, then reached into her apron. A thin notebook appeared, worn at the edges, pages curled. She held it like it mattered, like it cost her something to reveal. She slid it across the table, almost too quietly. I didn't want to complain. I just needed to know I wasn't crazy, so I wrote it down. Jackson opened it carefully. Each page filled with dates, table numbers, totals, tips, recorded on the POS and the smaller numbers she actually received. Red circles marked discrepancies, notes scrawled in margins, times recorded with precision. This wasn't guessing. This was evidence. Her voice trembled as she whispered, I've lost over $600 in the last month. But what hurts more is nobody asks who's dividing it. Nobody checks. Jackson didn't answer right away. He closed the notebook slowly, almost reverently, and slid it back toward her. His face gave nothing away, but inside, clarity sharpened like glass. A restaurant could recover from low margins, even bad reviews. But when the best people stop believing the system sees them, that's when it begins to die from the inside. The bell above the door jingled again as another customer entered, shaking off the drizzle. Cassie slipped the notebook back into her apron and moved on. Jackson's eyes followed her only briefly before turning back toward the register. Tyler leaned in closer to the POS, his fingers flipping through menus that weren't meant for him. User role settings. Jackson caught just enough of the screen before Tyler clicked away. Advanced access. Username, Tyler C. Jackson's jaw set. His hand tightened around the coffee cup. This wasn't a glitch. It was a configuration. Not theft by accident, but theft disguised as process. Moments later, the manager emerged. Brad Coleman. Crisp, buttoned down, sleeves rolled, a sleek pen clipped neatly to his pocket. He leaned against the counter, laughing with a regular like he didn't have a care in the world. The kind of manager who looked professional, who sounded competent, who smiled just enough to keep the surface polished. Cassie had said his name quietly before. Brad sets up the POS rolls. Now Jackson saw it firsthand. Brad didn't touch trays either. He didn't pour coffee. He didn't glance at the floor. His eyes never left the register, never far from Tyler. Jackson's mind was already racing, fitting the pieces together. 3 weeks of strong revenue, 38% turnover, staff engagement dead last. On paper, success. In reality, a system that had learned how to bleed from the shadows. He pulled his phone discreetly from his pocket, angling it toward the notebook he'd already photographed. Each image saved with precision, each note captured in digital permanence. He slid the phone away, scribbled on a folded sticky note, and pressed it under his cup before Cassie passed again. Block letters read, "Keep documenting. Don't hand this notebook to anyone. Wait for me to return." Cassie collected his empty plate without looking down, but when she returned later, her eyes flicked to the cup, then to him. She saw the note. Her nod was so small it was nearly invisible. Jackson rose from the booth at last, the weight of what he'd seen heavier than the rain outside. He walked toward the door as if he were just another customer leaving behind an uneventful breakfast. But in his chest, something had already shifted. The drizzle had stopped. The streets glistened under a gray morning light. Jackson slipped his phone from his pocket again, pressed a single contact, and held it to his ear. "Mara," he said, his voice low but steady. "We have a problem." On the other end, there was no hesitation. Understood. The silent investigation was no longer just his. Now, the system itself was under watch. The call lasted 93 seconds. That was all it took. Mara Lynn, head of internal investigations, didn't need a long explanation. 7 years with the company, 3 embezzlement rings dismantled, countless branches quietly put back on track. When Jackson said the POS system was being manipulated, she already knew what to do. Within the hour, Sunrise Diner number 28 was running in silent audit mode. The customers and staff didn't notice a thing. Orders still came through, tickets printed, receipts generated, but every roll change, Every override, every split transaction was being tracked line by line. The branch kept humming, unaware that its heartbeat was being monitored from the inside out. By the next morning, the first findings came in. Finding number 1. The system wasn't just adjusted, it had been rewritten. A hidden tier labeled Preferred Internal existed in the configuration files. This role didn't appear on the staff permission screen anyone could access. It was buried deeper. 3 accounts carried it. Brad Coleman, the manager, Tyler C., part-time server, and one more kitchen support, 03, a phantom user that didn't belong to any payroll record. Finding number 2. Over the past 30 days, the branch had processed more than $4,800 in digital tips. 67% of that money had been routed through Tyler's account, yet his ticket volume showed he served less than 15% of tables. Finding number 3. Payroll listed a kitchen employee named Marcus Hill. According to the clock-in records, he worked 21 of the last 25 mornings. But HR had no file for him. No onboarding documents, no tax forms, no social security verification. And when finance cross-checked, the SSN attached to Marcus Hill matched another record from a different branch, one that Jackson remembered investigating 2 years earlier. That case had been closed for lack of evidence. The manager back then, Brad Coleman, the final detail tied it all together. A shell company, Douglas Henderson LLC, was receiving weekly transfers labeled as service processing fees. The amounts matched the missing tip differentials to the dollar. On paper, it looked like payments for logistics. But the contact email tied to the LLC had once belonged to Brad himself. Jackson read the report alone in his office, lights dim, the storm inside him building. It wasn't just a few stolen tips. It was a system designed to funnel money upward, away from the staff who earned it, cloaked in the language of business. He remembered Cassie's quiet words, "I just needed to know I wasn't crazy." She had been documenting what no one else wanted to see. And now, the data confirmed it. She wasn't crazy. She was right. Jackson leaned back in his chair, notebook open beside the printed audit. His pen hovered, then pressed hard against the paper. 67% diverted. Hidden tier. Fake payroll. Shell company. Manager responsible. He closed his eyes for a moment, then reached for his phone again. "Mara," he said when she picked up. "Pull every transaction from branches Brad has managed in the last 5 years. If this worked here, it didn't start here. And it won't stop unless we cut it at the root." For the first time in a long while, his voice carried no disguise. This wasn't the quiet stranger in a corner booth anymore. This was the CEO, the founder, the man who had built Sunrise to be fair, transparent, a place where staff could take pride in their work. Somewhere along the way, that promise had been broken. And now, Jackson knew exactly who had broken it. He set the phone down, stared at the rain-streaked window of his office. Tomorrow, he would return to diner number 28, but not in disguise. Not with a cap pulled low and an old jacket to blend in. This time, he would walk through the door as himself. And Brad Coleman would finally see who he had been stealing from. The storm outside eased into silence, but inside, the reckoning was just beginning. The next morning broke clearer, the drizzle finally gone, sunlight spilling across the diner's glass windows. For the early shift, it was just another day. Coffee brewed, plates clattered, the neon sign buzzed faintly as it always had. But when the door opened this time, the man who stepped inside wasn't just another customer in a worn jacket. Jackson Reeves walked in without disguise. Navy suit pressed, shoulders square, no hesitation in his step. Conversation softened as he moved past the tables. The same booth where he had once sat quietly with a chipped cup was still empty, but he didn't head there. He walked straight toward the counter. Brad looked up from behind the register, that familiar, relaxed smile already in place. "Morning," he said casually, like a host greeting just another guest. "You looking for a table?" Jackson didn't answer right away. He set a small black folder on the counter, let it rest there, and finally spoke. His voice carried steady, not raised, but unmistakable. "Brad Coleman?" The manager's smile wavered. "That's right. And you are?" Jackson flipped open the folder. Inside lay the printouts from the silent audit. Pages of transactions, role assignments, shell transfers. He placed a hand on them and leaned forward. "I'm the man who built Sunrise, and I'm the man you've been stealing from." The color drained from Brad's face. He glanced toward Tyler, who had been standing nearby, suddenly rigid. I don't know what you're talking about, Brad stammered. Cassie was at the far end of the counter, tray in hand. She froze, eyes widening, recognizing the stranger from yesterday now standing with the authority of someone she had never imagined. Jackson's voice cut through the hum of the diner. For 30 days, 67% of this branch's digital tips have gone to one account. Not because of service, not because of volume, but because of access. An access tier you created. You even built a fake employee to hide it. Marcus Hill doesn't exist. And Douglas Henderson LLC? That's you. The room went silent. A fork clinked against a plate. A customer turned slowly in their chair. Tyler shifted uneasily, his hands slipping into his pockets. Brad's jaw tightened. This isn't the place to... Jackson placed another sheet on the counter, cutting him off. This is exactly the place, because the people you've been stealing from are standing right here. He nodded slightly toward Cassie, who lowered her tray, her eyes locked on the evidence spread across the counter. A ripple moved through the diner. Employees leaned closer, customers whispered. The quiet tension that had hung for months finally had a name, a shape, undeniable proof. Brad reached for the papers, but Jackson's hand pressed down firmly, stopping him cold. Don't bother. Copies are already with internal investigations, payroll, and legal. What I need from you right now is your resignation, effective immediately. For a long moment, Brad said nothing. His eyes darted around the room, searching for support. None came. The barista by the espresso machine stared openly. The trainee Cassie had helped shifted closer to her side. Even the regular customer he had been chatting with minutes earlier set his coffee down and turned away. Jackson pulled a sleek black business card from his jacket and placed it beside the papers. The silver letters caught the light. Jackson Reeves, Chief Executive Officer. A murmur swept across the diner. Customers who had looked at him like a stranger now recognized him as the man whose name hung on every sign, every menu, every paycheck. Brad swallowed hard, but no words came. His authority, once absolute in this small branch, had evaporated in a single moment. Jackson turned slightly, his voice softer now but no less firm. Cassie, she stepped forward, hesitant. You kept the records. You told the truth when no one else did. From this day on, you won't be invisible here anymore. Her eyes flickered, disbelief giving way to something steadier relief, recognition. She nodded, clutching the edge of her tray like it was the only solid thing left in the room. Jackson looked back at Brad one final time. Get your things. You're done here. The manager didn't argue. He didn't dare. Slowly, stiffly, he stepped away from the counter, the weight of a dozen eyes following him with every move. As the door swung shut behind Brad, the room exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for months. Jackson gathered the papers, slid them back into the folder, and straightened. His voice carried through the silence. Sunrise was built on one simple promise: fairness. If we can't keep that, we lose everything. Starting today, this branch will honor that promise again. And with that, the storm that had been building finally broke, not in chaos, but in clarity. The silence inside Sunrise Diner number 28 lingered long after Brad Coleman walked out the door. The clatter of plates and the hiss of the espresso machine seemed suddenly too loud, like the building itself wasn't sure how to return to normal. Jackson remained at the counter, folder still in hand. He scanned the faces around him, employees frozen mid-task, customers staring openly, Cassie standing with her tray pressed against her chest. She looked as if she had been holding her breath for months and had only just remembered how to exhale. He spoke again, steady but quieter this time. I know you've all seen things that didn't feel right, and I know most of you thought nothing could change, but it has, starting today. Tyler shifted uncomfortably near the register, his confidence from the morning gone. His eyes darted from the POS screen to the floor, like the evidence of his role might vanish if he didn't look up. Jackson didn't address him directly, not yet. Instead, he turned toward the staff at large. Tips will no longer pass through one person's hands. Every shift, every role will have transparency. Digital or cash, the split will be equal. The system has already been reset, and from now on, no one works invisible. Cassie's eyes widened. She glanced toward the younger trainee at her side, then back to Jackson. Her hand tightened around the tray, knuckles pale, as if she was still bracing for the moment to dissolve like a dream. Jackson placed the folder down and opened it one last time, revealing the printouts to the room. Columns of numbers, highlighted entries, red flags circled by the audit team. "This," he said firmly, "is what happens when power hides behind process. You deserve better. Sunrise was built for better." A murmur rippled through the cafe. The regular customer who had once laughed with Brad whispered something under his breath, shaking his head. The barista by the machine nodded subtly, a flash of relief crossing her face. The trainee's eyes shone with something close to hope. Jackson closed the folder and turned directly to Tyler. "You had access you should never have had. You took what wasn't yours. You're done here as well. HR will be in touch about the rest." The young man's mouth opened, but no words came. He glanced once at the door Brad had disappeared through, then back at the customers now staring openly at him. Without another sound, he slipped off his apron and walked stiffly out, the door swinging shut behind him. The air inside felt lighter, though still fragile. Jackson knew that broken trust didn't heal instantly. But this was the first cut through the fog, and once the light broke in, it wouldn't leave. He turned back toward Cassie. "I want you to know something," he said quietly, though every ear in the diner strained to catch it. "The notes you kept, the patience you carried, it wasn't wasted. You kept this place honest when no one else would. From today, you'll help train others. You'll make sure no one gets lost in the system again." Her breath caught. She blinked rapidly, as if she wasn't sure if he meant it. "Me?" "You," Jackson confirmed. "You're the reason this branch still has a heartbeat." "Ugh." A faint, shaky smile touched her lips for the first time since he had walked in. Around them, the staff seemed to draw straighter, as though Cassie's recognition lifted everyone just a little higher. Jackson picked up the black folder and tucked it under his arm. He took one last look around the room, the customers now murmuring with recognition, the staff standing a little taller, the weight of fear beginning to fall away. He spoke one final time, his voice carrying over the hum of the cafe. "Fairness is not a perk. It's not optional. It's the baseline. If we don't honor that, we don't deserve to serve a single cup of coffee." And with that, he turned toward the door. The morning sun cut through the glass, painting long stripes of light across the floor. As Jackson stepped outside, the bell jingled softly above him, no longer a signal of quiet suffering, but of a chapter finally closing. Behind him, inside the cafe, the staff moved differently. Not lighter yet, not fully free, but with the first real proof that someone at the top had seen them. And that, for the first time in a long time, was enough. The days that followed moved quietly, but nothing inside Sunrise Diner number 28 felt the same. Word spread faster than anyone expected. Customers who had been there during the reveal told the story to neighbors, co-workers, and friends. Some described the moment Brad's face went pale. Others repeated Jackson's final words about fairness being the baseline. By the end of the week, people were stopping in not just for coffee, but to see if the rumors were true, if the diner really had changed overnight. Cassie noticed it first. On Monday morning, the tip jar sat at the counter, but this time, every employee had access to the register. No invisible roles, no restricted logins. She swiped a card for table 7 herself and saw the digital tip confirmation appear instantly under her own name. For the first time in months, maybe years, the system reflected what was actually happening on the floor. She didn't say anything out loud, but the way her shoulders loosened gave her away. The trainee she had been helping Sarah smiled nervously at her. "It went through?" Cassie nodded. "It went through." By Tuesday, staff meetings looked different too. HR had arrived in person, walking the team through the reset system, showing how every transaction could now be verified by anyone. Transparency wasn't just a promise, it was built into the daily workflow. No more hidden tiers, no more phantom accounts. Some employees who had stayed silent under Brad's watch began speaking up. One admitted he had seen odd numbers on his pay stubs but didn't know how to question it. Another confessed she had thought about quitting after watching co-workers walk out month after month. The conversation was raw, uncomfortable at times, but necessary. For once, they weren't afraid to say what had been wrong. Jackson didn't attend those meetings in person, but his presence lingered. His letter, printed on Sunrise letterhead and pinned to the staff board, was read aloud by the district manager. "Integrity doesn't start with policies. It starts with people willing to hold the line when no one else does. What Cassie did here matters more than any audit. She reminded us who we're supposed to be." Cassie had to look down at her shoes when her name was spoken. She wasn't used to the weight of recognition, but Sarah nudged her with an elbow, whispering, "Told you it mattered." Customers noticed too. On Wednesday morning, an older man at table 5 left a note under his saucer. "Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for the honesty. Haven't seen that in a while." Beside it, he folded a crisp $20 bill. Cassie held the note in her hand longer than she needed to, her throat tight. By Thursday, the change had reached the wider network. Other branches were being audited quietly. Mara's team traced similar patterns back to Brad's earlier posts. Duplicate social security numbers, phantom employees, small shell companies. It was bigger than one diner, but Diner 28 had been the crack where the light broke through. Jackson received the reports late at night in his office. He read line after line, red ink circling the same tricks Brad had used before. He closed the files slowly, exhaling. This wasn't about a single manager anymore. It was about making sure the system couldn't be twisted again. He thought of Cassie, her frayed apron, her quiet voice, her small notebook filled with red circles. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't staged a protest. She had simply written it down, day after day, until the truth was undeniable. That was leadership, even if she didn't call it that. On Friday morning, Jackson returned to Diner 28. This time, there was no storm outside, no drizzle painting the glass. The sun cut bright against the pavement. As he stepped in, the bell jingled. And this time, the staff looked up not with suspicion, not with indifference, but with something closer to pride. Cassie approached with a tray, her movements as steady as ever. But when she set a cup of coffee in front of him, her voice carried more weight. "Black coffee, fresh this time." Jackson smiled faintly, lifting the cup. The bitterness was still there, but it was the good kind, the kind that woke you up, sharpened your senses. He glanced around the room, at staff moving with renewed energy, at customers lingering with trust restored. For the first time, the diner didn't feel like a place trying to hide its cracks. It felt like a place beginning to heal. Jackson raised the cup slightly, as if to himself, but his words carried just enough to be heard. "Here's to no one being invisible again." And for once, silence in the diner didn't feel heavy. It felt like agreement. Saturday mornings at sunrise, Diner number 28 had always been hectic lines at the door, regulars claiming their booths, the smell of bacon and coffee filling the air. But this week, something else lingered too, a new kind of energy. The staff moved differently, not rushed exactly, but purposeful. Customers noticed. The tension that used to hang in the air was gone, replaced with something steadier, quieter. Cassie felt it most when she picked up her tray. For months, she had been working at half strength, weighed down by the knowledge that no matter how hard she tried, her effort disappeared into someone else's pocket. Now, every refill, every plate, every smile counted again. The register showed her name. The tips lined up. Fairness wasn't perfect yet, but it was real. And real was enough to start breathing easier. Halfway through the morning rush, a man at table 9 stopped her as she cleared his plate. "Been coming here 15 years, he said. "Never seen this place run smoother." His tone carried no sarcasm, only surprise. Cassie thanked him softly and slipped the note of praise into her apron pocket like it was worth as much as a $20 tip. At the counter, Sarah, the trainee Cassie had helped, was running her own orders without hesitation. Her hands still shook sometimes, but now when she looked over, it wasn't fear in her eyes. It was determination. And whenever she stumbled, Cassie was there, guiding her through quietly, without Tyler hovering to take the credit. By noon, Jackson had arrived again. He didn't announce himself. He simply walked in, nodded at the staff, and sat at a booth near the window. No disguise this time, no reason to blend in. Yet he watched just as carefully as before. The difference was obvious. Staff laughed softly between tasks. Customers lingered instead of rushing out, and every receipt matched exactly what was on the tables. When Cassie approached with a fresh cup of coffee, Jackson spoke low enough for only her to hear. "How does it feel?" She hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Lighter, like I don't have to fight invisible walls anymore." Jackson nodded, taking a sip. The bitterness was there, but so was the warmth. That's how it should have been all along. Later that afternoon, Mara's team sent another update. The audit had expanded to 12 more branches. Patterns matched. Hidden roles, phantom employees, shell accounts. Brad hadn't worked alone, and he hadn't invented the scheme just here. It was spreading, like rot through the foundation. But now, there was proof. Enough to tear it out, root and stem. Jackson read the report on his phone as the diner buzzed around him. He thought of the staff he saw here: Cassie, Sarah, the barista behind the machine, and how close they had come to walking away forever. If they had, the numbers would have looked fine on paper, at least for a while, but the heart of the place would have been gone. He set the phone down, looking out the window where sunlight bounced off the pavement. For years, he had told himself leadership meant building systems that worked. But sitting there, hearing the laughter of staff who had once been silent, he realized systems only mattered if the right people were willing to hold them together. Cassie walked by again, and he caught her eye. She looked tired, but her expression carried something stronger resolve. She no longer blended into the background. She was seen. Jackson leaned back, a quiet thought settling in his chest. A restaurant could survive bad weeks, even bad quarters. But what it couldn't survive was people like Cassie giving up hope. And because she hadn't, because she had written it all down in a small, worn notebook, Sunrise still had a chance. As the afternoon sun shifted, Jackson stood to leave. He placed a bill under his cup, more than enough for the coffee, but that wasn't the point. The point was what he said before stepping out. To anyone who's ever felt invisible, your work matters. It always did. The bell jingled as he walked into the light. Inside, the staff carried on, steadier than before. And for the first time in a long time, the diner didn't just serve meals. It served proof that fairness could return, even after being stolen piece by piece. By the following week, diner number 28 no longer felt like the same place. Customers noticed the change. First, coffee came quicker, smiles felt genuine, and no one lingered nervously near the register. Word had spread, and more regulars returned, curious if the story they'd heard was true. For Cassie, each shift carried a new weight. She no longer counted tips in secret, no longer circled numbers in a notebook with shaking hands. Instead, she logged into the system openly, her name attached to every order she served. The transparency felt almost strange at first, but soon it became routine the way it should have been all along. Sarah, the trainee, stood taller now. She greeted customers without glancing over her shoulder, confident in the knowledge that she had guidance she could trust. The other staff leaned into their work too, no longer drained by silent resentment. The diner ran smoother, not because of tighter rules, but because people finally believed they were seen. Jackson visited once more, quietly slipping into a booth during the morning rush. He didn't need to say much. The sight before him told the story. A branch once eroded by hidden theft, now rebuilt on simple fairness. He watched Cassie pour coffee, Sarah deliver plates, and even the barista laugh softly while steaming milk. The place had its pulse back. When Cassie passed by, Jackson lifted his cup slightly. "You did more than you know," he said. She paused, met his eyes, and smiled, small, steady, but real. For the first time, she didn't look like someone carrying a secret weight. She looked like someone who had won. The system was fixed, the staff restored, and the diner, once cracked by silence, finally felt whole again. Sunday evening settled quietly over the town, the diner glowing amber against the fading sky. Inside, the floor was calm after a long week. Plates stacked, counters wiped, the last few customers finishing their meals in peace. Cassie tied her apron loosely now, no longer clutching it like armor. Sarah laughed at something a coworker said, her nervous edge gone. Jackson stood near the window, hands in his pockets, watching the reflection of the neon sign hum steadily. The storm that had started with a chipped cup of coffee and a quiet confession had come full circle. What had been hidden in silence was no longer invisible. He turned once more to the staff, his voice even, carrying just enough to be heard. A restaurant can survive bad numbers. It can survive tough seasons, but it cannot survive losing its people. Never forget that. Cassie held his gaze, nodding slightly. She didn't need to say anything. The small notebook in her apron pocket said it all. Proof that the truth mattered. Proof that someone had listened. Jackson stepped out into the cool night, the bell above the door chiming one last time. Behind him, the diner buzzed with quiet life, stronger than before. As he walked to his truck, he thought of the promise he'd made when he founded Sunrise. Fairness, dignity, integrity. They weren't slogans, they were commitments, renewed every single day. And now, after everything, that promise had been restored. The story began with silence. It ended with a voice that would no longer be ignored.